The sun had barely crested the tangled canopy of the jungle when the scream of birds and the hush of wind gave way to a sound more ancient than either. Water moving with patient power, winding its way through the dense undergrowth like a silver serpent too wide to hide. The river was swollen from the night's rain, its muddy banks steaming in the heat of morning, and deep in its chest, secrets churned, secrets of vanished hoofbeats, broken branches, old bones. In the shallows stood a solitary buffalo named Moyo, his massive frame half submerged, a silhouette of strength wrapped in mud and mist. His horns curved like crescents carved by time, weathered and chipped, while his body bore the signs of 1,000 battles. Scarred shoulders, a split ear, a limp in his right hind leg that told stories only he remembered. Yet it was not pain that made him linger here, knee-deep in waters that reeked of memory. It was love. Near the reeds just upriver, barely visible behind the fallen trunk of a kapok tree, a small figure trembled, a young calf, not his by blood, but one he had chosen to protect when its mother vanished 3 moons ago in the night, taken by something with claws and eyes that glowed in the dark. Moyo had led the herd ever since the old matriarch fell, and no other dared to challenge the silence left in her wake. But now, for the first time in days, he had broken from the group to lead the calf to drink before the day grew harsh. He trusted this river, or perhaps he no longer feared it. The morning air was thick, the sky barely visible through layers of green, and insects swarmed in buzzing clouds above the water, painting the light in flickers of gold and ash. The jungle watched silently as Moyo lowered his great head and drank, his nostrils flaring, his breath steady but heavy. The calf did not follow, he was too small, too cautious. Moyo raised his head, water dripping from his muzzle, and turned to nudge the calf forward with a grunt of reassurance. That's when it happened. With no sound, none, a ripple broke from beneath the surface and exploded into the air like a nightmare uncoiling from the deep. The crocodile was massive, old, a thing carved from green-black leather and patience, and it struck with such suddenness that the very trees seemed to flinch. Its jaws clamped around Moyo's front leg, the force violent enough to twist bone, and the buffalo bellowed, a thunderous sound that shattered the morning stillness like glass. The calf screamed, frozen in place, eyes wide as moons, while Moyo did not retreat. He did not panic. He lowered his weight into the struggle, using the strength of a body shaped by storms and years to resist the pull of the ancient predator. Blood spiraled into the water like ink in a broken sky. The crocodile thrashed, its tail a whip of chaos, trying to drag the buffalo deeper, but Moyo twisted, using his other leg to stomp, once, twice, 3 times, striking the water with earth-shaking power. The jungle came alive with motion, monkeys screaming from above, birds taking flight, yet no one intervened. Nature watched. And the river, too, seemed to wait. Moyo's leg was cracking under pressure, pain searing through him like fire, but his eyes, dark, deep, ancient, were locked on the calf. He saw its terror, its helplessness. And somewhere in that pain, a choice was made. Instead of pulling back, he stepped forward into the grip of the beast. The crocodile, surprised, adjusted its hold, biting higher. That's what Moyo needed. He twisted his horns downward and slammed the broad ridge of his skull into the reptile's eye socket with devastating force. The impact made the beast release him, just for a second, but that second was enough. Moyo turned, dragging his wounded leg, and with one massive motion, positioned himself between the crocodile and the calf. His body trembled, but he stood like a wall of earth, bleeding and furious. The crocodile didn't retreat, it hovered just beneath the surface, waiting. It had tasted flesh and was not ready to let go. But Moyo didn't move either. The calf stepped back, understanding now, not from instinct but from something deeper. Trust. Moyo growled low in his throat, a sound not of fear but defiance. The water trembled between them, predator and protector, both unwilling to yield. Above, in the jungle's fringe, hidden among the vines, a man watched through binoculars. His name was Elias, a field ranger from the nearby reserve, and he had been tracking the herd since dawn, trying to assess the new male's behavior. What he saw now made him lower the lenses. He had seen animals fight before, kill, flee. But this was different. The way the buffalo stood, how he placed himself between the calf and death, Elias had seen soldiers do the same during the war. He reached for his radio but hesitated. What could he say? That he saw an animal make a choice no animal should? That it was bleeding and should be left alone, because interfering would dishonor something sacred? No. He said nothing. Below, the crocodile hissed, then turned, slinking back into deeper water. Not defeated, but unwilling to press further, for now. Moyo didn't chase. He waited, shaking, leg bent and bleeding, as the river slowly grew calm again. The calf stepped to his side, pressed its small head against his flank, and together they stood, framed by jungle and water, two shadows against the rising sun. Elias lowered his gaze. Something in him broke. Something old and brittle and tired. He had lost a child once, years ago, in a flood that came too fast. He had blamed the river ever since. But now, watching this, he realized, maybe it wasn't the river that had taken. Maybe it had simply remembered. And now it offered something back. In the distance, the rest of the herd stirred. Somewhere, thunder grumbled on the horizon. And as the day stretched forward, no one, not man, not beast, not even the river, could guess what trials still waited in the shadow of the trees. But one thing was certain, Moyo had drawn a line. And the jungle had heard. The jungle breathed a heavy sigh as the morning slipped into the thick, humid noon, the sunlight filtering through the dense canopy like molten gold, touching the leaves in flickering patches that danced with the restless wind. Moyo stood motionless by the riverbank, his wounded leg trembling with pain, each heartbeat echoing like a distant drum in the quiet vastness. The calf, whom the locals had named Quito, meaning precious in their fading dialect, huddled close, eyes wide with both fear and awe, as if sensing that this massive guardian carried a burden heavier than mere flesh and blood. The surrounding jungle seemed to watch, a silent witness to the fragile balance of life and death playing out beside the dark water. Elias, the ranger, remained hidden, crouched low behind a thicket of ferns and vines, his heart pounding not from fear but from a sudden surge of hope he hadn't felt in years. His camera hung forgotten around his neck as he observed the rawness of survival, the unspoken courage in the buffalo's stance. Moyo, despite his injury, refused to retreat to the safety of the herd, instead choosing to stand sentinel. The river's edge was their sanctuary and their battleground, a place where ancient forces collided with the present's fragile promise. Yet, this calm was deceptive. The air thickened, and the subtle signs of nature's unrest whispered warnings. Birds ceased their songs, insects fell silent, and even the leaves on the tallest kapok tree stilled. Somewhere, far beyond the immediate clearing, a rumble echoed like a distant storm. But this was no ordinary weather, it was the approaching roar of human machines. The low growl of engines shattered the natural silence, metal beasts tearing through the undergrowth, carrying men whose eyes were filled with hunger, not for life, but for control. They were poachers, relentless and ruthless, armed with guns that did not hesitate, traps that did not discriminate. Their presence was a new and brutal threat, one that Moyo had only heard of in whispered stories among the elders of the herd. Yet today, that threat had arrived in force. As the machines grew closer, Moyo's senses sharpened. Pain from his wounded leg became a distant echo behind a fierce resolve. The calf nuzzled his side, trembling, and Moyo turned his heavy head toward the sound of destruction, nostrils flaring with the scent of smoke and gunpowder. The poachers emerged from the tree line like a dark tide, their faces obscured by masks and their hands ready to claim what the jungle could not protect. Among them was a young hunter named Marco, whose past was tangled with regret and loss, a man who once loved the wilderness but now sought to conquer it. He saw Moyo immediately, a titan standing wounded but unbowed, and a flicker of something unspoken passed through his gaze, a silent challenge or perhaps an unacknowledged respect. Elias, unable to stay hidden, stepped forward cautiously, hands raised in peace. His voice cracked as he called out to the poachers, begging them to reconsider, to leave the herd in peace. But greed and fear drowned out reason, and a shot rang out, echoing through the jungle like a death knell. Moyo roared, the sound vibrating through the trees, shaking the earth beneath their feet. Without hesitation, the buffalo charged, an unstoppable force of raw will and desperation. The poachers scattered, tripping over roots, knocking into each other as they fled from the fury of a creature fighting not for itself, but for the life it had sworn to protect. Marco hesitated, weapon raised, but something in Moyo's eyes stopped his hand. The buffalo was no mere beast, he was a sentinel of the wild, wounded but unyielding, a symbol of resilience that stirred a long-buried conscience within the hunter. Elias moved closer, calling out to Marco, imploring him to see beyond the gun barrel. In that tense moment, a second threat emerged. The river's waters began to rise rapidly, swollen by the relentless rains upstream. The jungle's delicate balance teetered as the floodwaters surged, sweeping away trees, mud, and debris. Moyo's wounded leg faltered, and he stumbled, but the calf remained steadfast by his side. The poachers, now caught between the charging buffalo and the rising flood, faced a choice: continue their hunt or flee the wrath of nature's own fury. Marco's resolve broke. He lowered his weapon and helped Elias pull the other poachers back into the forest's embrace. As the floodwaters swallowed the riverbank, Moyo found refuge on a small island of hardened earth, battered but alive. The calf lay beside him, both drenched and shivering, their bond forged stronger by the day's trials. Night fell with a heavy silence, broken only by the distant roar of the flood and the soft cries of creatures displaced. Elias lit a small fire on the opposite bank, his eyes reflecting the flames as he watched over the buffalo and the calf. In the flickering light, memories surfaced, his lost daughter's laughter, the promises he had made to protect what remained. Across the river, the jungle seemed to hold its breath, as if acknowledging the courage of one wounded buffalo who dared to stand against both man and nature. Moyo's breath was ragged, but his spirit unbroken. He knew the battle was far from over. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, new choices. But tonight, beneath the ancient stars, the river whispered a truth. Survival was not just a matter of strength, but of heart. And in that truth, Moyo found hope. The dawn broke thick and heavy over the jungle, a suffocating blanket of mist clinging to the leaves and vines like a secret waiting to be revealed. Moyo lay low on the island, the swelling of his injured leg a constant ache that gnawed at his resolve, but his eyes remained sharp and watchful. Quito, the calf, nestled close to his side, unafraid now, having learned that in this great wild world, protection came from the most unexpected places. Across the river, Elias moved silently, his heart burdened yet lightened by the buffalo's resilience. The ranger knew the forest as one knows an old friend, its rhythms, its dangers, its fragile beauty. And he knew that the coming days would test them all. The floodwaters had receded slightly overnight, but the jungle was forever changed. Trees had fallen, paths were lost beneath mud and detritus, and the animals were scattered, displaced from their familiar haunts. The herd, once strong and numerous, was fractured, vulnerable. But Moyo refused to abandon his duty. With painstaking effort, he rose, his massive body trembling with the effort, muscles taut beneath scars and sweat. The calf followed, steady and small but fierce in spirit. Together, they navigated the flooded banks, the water swirling with broken branches and the ghosts of lost nests. The river was no longer a friend but a cruel test, demanding sacrifices in its relentless flow. Yet, Moyo's eyes held a quiet determination, not just to survive, but to lead. The jungle itself seemed to respond to his courage, the rustling leaves whispering encouragement and warning alike. As they moved through the underbrush, a new sound reached their ears, a low, mournful howl that was both alien and hauntingly familiar. From the shadows stepped a creature both feared and misunderstood, a lone jaguar, sleek and powerful, with eyes like molten amber that pierced the darkness. The jaguar regarded Moyo and Quito with an intensity that spoke of hunger and caution, but also curiosity. In the wild, predator and prey are bound by the same ancient laws, yet here was something more, a fragile truce forged not by instinct alone but by necessity. Moyo lowered his head slightly, a silent gesture of respect, and Quito instinctively pressed against him, sensing the tension in the air. Elias, watching from a hidden vantage, felt the stirrings of a story that defied logic. The jaguar's presence was a reminder that the jungle did not forget. It remembered every struggle, every alliance, every act of courage. And now, it was inviting Moyo into a deeper part of its secret world. The jaguar padded forward cautiously, then paused, its gaze fixed on the calf. There was a tenderness there, a recognition that transcended species. Slowly, the great cat lowered its head, brushing a gentle nose against Quito's forehead. The calf trembled but did not flee. Moyo stepped between them protectively, muscles coiled like springs, but he did not strike. This moment was more than a chance encounter. It was a crossroads. The jaguar's name was Luna, and she was no ordinary hunter. She, too, bore scars, both visible and invisible, from the changing jungle and the encroaching threats of man. Alone and aging, Luna had survived where many had fallen, learning to navigate a world where the old rules no longer applied. Together, Moyo and Luna formed an unlikely alliance, one born not of trust but of mutual respect and the shared goal of protecting the fragile life that remained. As the sun climbed higher, Elias approached cautiously, knowing that human presence was a dangerous variable in this delicate balance. He carried with him a small bag of supplies, medicines for wounds, food for the calf, and a notebook filled with observations and dreams. When Moyo met his gaze, there was a silent understanding. Elias would not interfere with the wildness of the jungle, but would stand guard from the edges, a guardian in his own right. Over the coming days, the trio, buffalo, jaguar, and ranger, wove a tapestry of survival. Luna taught Moyo how to read the signs of danger in the rustling leaves and shifting shadows. Moyo offered protection and strength where Luna's agility could not reach. Elias documented their journey, each page a testament to the power of connection in a world unraveling. But the peace was fragile. Word of the poachers' defeat had spread, and soon, armed men returned, more numerous and desperate, cutting paths through the jungle with axes and fire. The river swelled again, this time with the roar of engines and the crack of rifles. Moyo's injury deepened, but he refused to surrender. Quito, growing stronger each day, became a symbol of hope, innocence at the heart of chaos. One evening, as twilight bled into night, the poachers surrounded the trio's refuge, their shadows flickering in the firelight. Luna hissed low, a warning to Elias, who scrambled to pack his equipment. Moyo stood firm, a wall of muscle and will, but the odds were overwhelming. In that moment, the jungle itself seemed to rise. A chorus of voices, birds, monkeys, other buffalo, joined in a deafening call that echoed through the canopy, a rallying cry against destruction. The poachers faltered, fear breaking through their greed. Marco, the hesitant hunter, stepped forward once more, his weapon lowered. He saw in Moyo not just an animal, but a living testament to resilience and love. The floodwaters, the jungle, the alliances, everything converged in that charged moment of decision. The poachers fled into the night, chased by the fury of a wild that would no longer be tamed by cruelty. Exhausted but unbroken, Moyo collapsed beside the river, Quito nuzzling his neck. Elias knelt, pressing a hand to the buffalo's side, feeling the steady beat of life beneath the wounds. Luna disappeared into the shadows, her part of the story told but not ended. The jungle sighed in relief, a fragile peace reclaimed, but the journey was far from over. In the distance beyond the river and the fires, a new dawn was coming, one that demanded courage, sacrifice, and the unyielding belief that love, in all its forms, could heal even the deepest scars. The jungle was waking anew beneath a sky heavy with the promise of rain, its dense green canopy shimmering with a soft spray of early droplets that danced in the faint light. Moyo lay still on the riverbank, the heavy weight of exhaustion pressing down on his broad shoulders. His breath came slow and uneven, the wound on his leg throbbing with a pain that no longer demanded immediate attention but lingered like a dull reminder of battles past and yet to come. Quito, the once timid calf, now stood at his side with a newfound confidence, his eyes gleaming with the fire of survival and the lessons learned in the shadows of the jungle's cruel embrace. Across the river, Elias paced with restless energy, his gaze darting between the swollen currents and the fragile forms of his companions. The poachers' retreat had been temporary. Their greed was a force of nature as relentless as the jungle's own wildness. Word traveled fast in these parts, carried by whispers among the local villagers, the crackle of radios, and the silent passage of scouts hidden in the undergrowth. Marco, the conflicted hunter who had once sought to claim Moyo's life, now found himself wrestling with a different kind of war, one within his own soul. His nights were haunted by images of the buffalo's unwavering gaze, the calves' trembling innocence, and the jungle's unyielding demand for respect. He could no longer ignore the truth that survival was a shared burden, one that blurred the lines between hunter and hunted, man and beast. That morning, as the rain thickened into a steady downpour, the jungle began to stir with an urgency that both unsettled and emboldened the trio. Luna, the jaguar, emerged from the shadows, her sleek form glistening with wet leaves and mud. She moved silently across the soggy earth, her golden eyes reflecting the storm's fury and a quiet determination that seemed almost human in its depth. Her presence was a balm to Moyo's weariness, a reminder that alliances forged in hardship could transcend fear and ancient enmities. Together, they faced a new reality. The river was rising again, swollen by rains from distant mountains, threatening to sweep away the fragile sanctuary they had carved from the jungle's unforgiving heart. The herd was scattered, many lost to the flood's cruel embrace, and the few that remained looked to Moyo for guidance, their eyes wide with desperation and hope. In the heavy rain, the river's roar grew louder, drowning out the cries of distant animals and the faint whispers of the jungle's ancient spirits. The water surged like a living beast, swallowing banks and eroding roots, promising destruction and rebirth in equal measure. Moyo's leg throbbed anew as he rose to his feet, steadying himself against a fallen log. Quito followed, his small frame shaking but resolute. Elias hurried to prepare their meager camp, gathering what supplies could be saved from the flood's reach, his hands steady despite the storm raging in his mind. The rain blurred the line between earth and sky, turning the jungle into a labyrinth of shadows and reflections. As night fell, the thunder growled like a warning, and the jungle seemed to hold its breath. Then, the flood came, a wall of dark, churning water that crashed through the riverbanks with relentless fury. Moyo and Luna moved quickly, rallying the scattered herd and the smaller creatures who sought refuge in their presence. Quito's frightened cries were swallowed by the storm, but Moyo's bellow echoed like a beacon, guiding them through the chaos. The animals fled through the rising waters, their hooves and paws pounding against the mud and roots as they sought higher ground. Moyo's strength was a lifeline, but his injury slowed him, forcing Luna to take the lead, scouting ahead and warning of dangers unseen beneath the swirling currents. Elias, drenched and exhausted, did his best to follow, clutching a satchel of supplies and a worn notebook filled with sketches and notes that had become his lifeline to hope. In the midst of the deluge, a sudden cry pierced the storm, a young woman's voice, desperate and trembling. Elias recognized it instantly as Amara, a local villager and wildlife advocate who had often crossed paths with him in their shared efforts to protect the jungle's fragile balance. Without hesitation, Elias shouted her name, his voice nearly lost in the roaring tempest. Moyo and Luna veered toward the sound, navigating fallen trees and raging water. There, trapped on a small, rapidly disappearing patch of earth, was Amara, clutching a small bundle wrapped in cloth, an injured child pulled from the flood's grasp. Moyo stepped forward, water lapping at his knees, and with careful precision, lowered his massive head so Elias and Luna could help lift Amara to safety. The calf, sensing the urgency, nudged closer, his eyes filled with determination and fear. The rescue was perilous. The river threatened to claim them all, but in that moment, a fragile trust blossomed between human and beast. As they reached higher ground, soaked and shivering, the storm began to ease, leaving behind a landscape transformed and scarred. The jungle, though battered, still pulsed with life. Amara, grateful and trembling, looked into Moyo's weary eyes and whispered words that would echo in Elias's heart for years to come. "You are more than an animal. You are a guardian." That night, under a sky slowly clearing of storm clouds, Elias recorded the day's events, his hands steady despite the exhaustion that weighed on him. Moyo lay nearby, surrounded by the surviving herd, his breath even but heavy. Luna curled in the shadows, vigilant and watchful. And Quito, growing stronger, slept against his protector's side, a symbol of hope amid devastation. The journey was far from over. The poachers would return, and the jungle's fragile peace remained at risk. But the bond forged in fire and flood was a beacon, a testament to the power of courage, love, and sacrifice. In the dawn's first light, Elias closed his notebook and whispered a vow, to stand beside these wild souls, to bear witness to their story, and to fight for the world that still believed in miracles. The sun was barely a pale glow behind the thick jungle canopy when Moyo stirred, his heavy body shifting with a mixture of pain and purpose. The morning air was thick with the scent of wet earth and moss, the aftermath of the storm still clinging to the leaves like a lingering memory. Around him, the herd moved cautiously, their eyes flickering with uncertainty, shadows cast by a jungle that seemed both alive and haunted. Quito, now growing stronger and more independent, nuzzled his side, a constant reminder of the future that depended on their survival. Elias sat nearby, his worn notebook open on his knees, fingers stained with ink and mud as he documented the fragile thread of life they all clung to. His thoughts were heavy with the weight of recent events, Amara's rescue, the floods, and the looming threat of the poachers who would not be easily deterred. Luna's absence was felt deeply. The jaguar, ever elusive, had vanished into the depths of the jungle after the storm, her presence missed but her spirit lingering like a guardian's whisper. Elias hoped she was safe, navigating the wilderness with the same fierce determination that defined her. As the day wore on, the jungle pulsed with a renewed energy, the rains having washed away some of the decay but revealing new dangers beneath the surface. The herd moved slowly through the dense undergrowth, each step measured and wary. Moyo's leg throbbed with a relentless ache, a reminder of the battle scars that marked his body and soul. Yet, his gaze was steady, eyes reflecting a wisdom born from pain and perseverance. In the distance, the faint hum of chainsaws broke the fragile calm, a harsh reminder that the human threat was far from over. The poachers had returned, this time with heavier machinery and a darker resolve. Elias's heart clenched as he heard the rumble growing louder, the sound echoing through the jungle like a drumbeat of impending doom. Determined to protect his newfound family, Elias gathered what little equipment remained, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Moyo, sensing the urgency, let out a low, resonant bellow that rolled through the trees like thunder. The herd responded, a chorus of voices rising in defiance, a primal stand against the destruction encroaching on their home. The first encounter was sudden and brutal. The poachers, armed and ruthless, advanced with machetes and rifles, cutting paths through the jungle with mechanical precision. Moyo charged forward, his massive frame a living wall against the invaders. The battle was fierce, a chaotic clash of wills and survival. Moyo's hooves thundered against the earth, sending men fleeing in panic. Quito stayed close, darting through the underbrush with surprising agility for his age. Elias moved swiftly, coordinating with Amara and a small group of villagers who had come to aid the animals, their faces set with determination and fear. As the conflict escalated, Moyo found himself face to face with Marco, the conflicted hunter whose conscience had begun to stir but whose past still weighed heavy on his shoulders. Marco raised his rifle, hesitation flickering across his eyes, but Moyo's gaze, fierce yet pleading, stayed his hand. In that moment, the jungle seemed to hold its breath, the thin line between life and death stretching taut. Suddenly, a shrill cry shattered the tension. A trap hidden beneath the foliage snapped shut, ensnaring Quito's leg. The calf struggled, panic flooding his eyes as the poachers closed in, sensing victory. Moyo's roar shook the canopy, a desperate, heart-wrenching sound that cut through the chaos. With a surge of strength born from love and fury, he charged at the nearest poacher, knocking him aside with a force that sent branches flying. Elias and Amara rushed to Quito's side, working frantically to free the calf from the cruel metal jaws. Luna reappeared, silent as the shadows, her eyes blazing with a fierce protective fire. She leapt into the fray, claws flashing, scattering the poachers with unexpected ferocity. The tide of the battle shifted as the jungle itself seemed to rise in defense of its own. The remaining poachers, overwhelmed and terrified, fled into the depths of the forest, leaving behind broken traps and shattered dreams of conquest. The jungle was scarred, the cost of survival etched into the land and the bodies of its defenders. Moyo's injury worsened, his breaths shallow and ragged, but his spirit remained unbroken. Quito nuzzled him gently, a silent promise of strength and renewal. Elias knelt beside them, tears mingling with the dirt on his face, his voice a soft prayer of gratitude and hope. The night fell heavy and silent, the stars hidden behind a blanket of clouds. Yet, beneath the darkness, a new bond had been forged, a bond of trust, sacrifice, and unyielding love that transcended species and circumstance. In the quiet moments, Elias whispered to Moyo of a future where jungle and man could coexist, where guardians like the buffalo and jaguar could roam free without fear. Moyo's eyes closed slowly, not in surrender, but in a weary peace. The journey ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges that would test every fiber of their being. But the fire of hope burned bright in the hearts of those who believed in the power of compassion and courage. The story of Moyo and his companions was far from over. It was a living testament to the resilience of life and the transformative power of love. And as dawn's first light touched the jungle once more, the promise of a new beginning shimmered on the horizon, a beginning shaped by sacrifice, strengthened by unity, and illuminated by the unwavering spirit of a buffalo who dared to stand against the darkness. The jungle's breath was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves as dawn stretched its first golden fingers through the thick canopy. Moyo lay motionless beneath a towering fig tree, his massive body curled protectively around Quito, whose small form trembled with the chill of the morning mist. The wounds on Moyo's leg had worsened overnight, festering with infection and pain that gnawed at his strength, yet his spirit remained unyielding, a silent promise that he would endure for those who depended on him. Elias sat nearby, vigilantly watching, his hands steady as he applied herbal salves with care and reverence. The ranger's eyes were filled with a quiet sorrow and determination, mirroring the duality of hope and despair that pulsed through the jungle. Amara had returned to the nearby village to rally support, knowing that the fight to protect this fragile ecosystem and its guardians was far from over. The poachers were regrouping, their greed fueled by desperation and the promise of profit, while the jungle itself whispered warnings carried by the wind through rustling leaves and shifting shadows. As the sun climbed higher, the jungle came alive with the sounds of survival, birds calling out warnings, insects droning in endless harmony, and distant roars that spoke of challenges beyond the horizon. Moyo's breath came shallow but steady, the weight of his body a testament to battles fought and sacrifices made. Quito nestled closer, his young eyes bright with unwavering trust and fierce loyalty. Their bond was a beacon in the encroaching darkness, a living symbol of resilience that transcended species and circumstance. Luna, the jaguar, moved silently through the underbrush, her sleek form a shadow among shadows. She prowled the jungle's edge, alert and watchful, guarding not only her own survival but that of the herd and the fragile peace that had been forged through blood and courage. Her amber eyes caught every movement, every whisper of danger, as she prepared for the coming storm, a battle not just for life, but for the soul of the jungle itself. That evening, as the sky darkened and clouds gathered like an ominous curtain, Elias returned with a group of villagers, armed not with weapons but with tools for restoration and hope. They carried seeds, saplings, and supplies to rebuild what had been lost, to heal the wounds inflicted upon the land and its creatures. The villagers' faces reflected a mixture of fear and determination, their spirits lifted by the story of Moyo and the strength of the buffalo's stand. Together, they worked through the night, planting and tending, weaving threads of life into the fabric of a jungle struggling to breathe. But the peace was shattered before dawn. The poachers struck again, this time with greater numbers and ruthless intent. The jungle trembled beneath the thunder of their machines and the crackle of gunfire, a symphony of destruction that threatened to drown out the song of life. Moyo stirred, pain and rage igniting his senses. Despite his injury, he rose, a colossal force of nature determined to protect the fragile family that had become his world. Luna leapt from the shadows, her claws flashing in the dim light as she confronted the invaders with fierce defiance. The villagers and Elias stood their ground, united in purpose and spirit, their voices rising in a chorus of resistance. The battle was brutal and unforgiving. Moyo charged through the chaos, his mighty hooves shattering traps and scattering foes. Quito darted between legs, a flash of hope and innocence amidst the turmoil. Luna's growls echoed like thunder, striking fear into hearts hardened by greed. Yet, the price was high. Moyo's leg gave way beneath him, the pain nearly overwhelming, but his will held firm. In a desperate act of protection, he positioned himself between the poachers and the youngest villagers, a living shield forged from muscle and heart. Elias fought alongside, wielding nothing but his determination and the bonds formed in this crucible of survival. As dawn broke, the jungle stood battered but unbroken. The poachers retreated, their machinery silenced by the resilience of those who refused to yield. Moyo collapsed beneath the fig tree once more, his body trembling but victorious. Quito nestled beside him, their breaths mingling in the cool morning air. Elias knelt, pressing a hand to the buffalo's side, tears blurring hhis vision as he whispered words of gratitude and promise. Luna disappeared into the deep jungle, her watchful eyes never leaving the horizon. In the days that followed, the village rallied to protect their jungle home, inspired by the bravery of Moyo and his companions. A sanctuary was established, a haven where the wild could heal and thrive, guarded by the stories and sacrifices of those who had fought for its survival. Moyo, though weakened, found new purpose in his role as guardian, his spirit intertwined with the jungle's heartbeat. Quito grew strong, a symbol of hope and renewal for all who witnessed their journey. Elias and Amara became ambassadors of conservation, their lives forever changed by the buffalo's courage and the fragile beauty of the wild. The story of Moyo's stand against darkness became a legend, a reminder that true strength lies not in domination, but in love, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds that connect all life. As the sun set over the jungle, casting long shadows and bathing the leaves in golden light, the jungle whispered a promise of rebirth, resilience, and the enduring power of the wild heart. The jungle awoke with a hush, the dawn light filtering gently through the dense canopy and casting dappled shadows on the earth below. The air was thick with the sense of damp foliage and blooming flowers, a fragile calm after the storm of recent days. Moyo stood with a measured grace beneath the towering trees, his massive frame scarred but unbowed, a living monument to resilience and hope. His leg, though weakened and still tender from injury, bore his weight with quiet determination. Beside him, Quito moved with increasing confidence, his youthful steps echoing the strength inherited from his protector. The bond between them was no longer merely survival, it had blossomed into something profound, a silent testament to love and loyalty that transcended words. Elias and Amara walked quietly through the thick underbrush, their faces etched with weariness but shining with purpose. The sanctuary they had helped create was beginning to thrive, a beacon of life in a world that often seemed bent on destruction. The villagers, once skeptical and fearful, now embraced their roles as guardians, their hands nurturing saplings and their hearts rekindled with a deep reverence for the wild. The days passed in a rhythm of healing and vigilance. The jungle, scarred by human greed but rich with life, whispered stories of renewal to those who would listen. Moyo patrolled the borders of the sanctuary, his keen senses alert to any sign of danger. Luna, ever elusive, shadowed his movements from the treetops, her watchful eyes reflecting the fierce spirit that had saved them all more than once. But peace, as fragile as a spider's web glistening in morning dew, was not to last. A new threat emerged from the shadows, an illegal logging operation, vast and mechanized, advancing rapidly on the edges of the sanctuary. The heavy machinery carved deep scars into the earth, uprooting ancient trees and silencing the songs of countless creatures. Elias and Amara rallied the villagers and conservationists, their voices rising in protest and determination. Yet, the battle ahead was daunting, the enemy relentless and well-armed. Moyo sensed the growing peril as clearly as he felt the wind shift and the earth tremble beneath the machine's tread. The jungle's heartbeat quickened, a wild drumbeat calling for courage and sacrifice. One evening, as twilight bled into night and fireflies danced like tiny stars among the leaves, Moyo encountered a solitary figure at the sanctuary's edge, a young boy named Taji, his wide eyes filled with fear and wonder. Taji had wandered away from the village, drawn by stories of the mighty buffalo and the jaguar that guarded the jungle's soul. Moyo approached cautiously, his heavy breaths mingling with the night air. The boy did not flee but stood still, sensing the gentle strength emanating from the great beast. In that quiet moment, a bridge formed between human and wild, fragile yet unbreakable. Taji's story unfolded, a tale of loss and longing, of a family fractured by the encroaching violence and the boy's desperate hope for a better future. Moyo listened in his way, understanding the silent language of sorrow and resilience. Inspired, Elias and Amara invited Taji to join their efforts, his youthful spirit igniting new hope among the villagers. Together, they planned strategies to protect the sanctuary, to stand firm against the machines that threatened to unravel the delicate tapestry of life. The confrontation came swiftly. At dawn, the machines roared to life, metal claws tearing into the earth, shattering the sanctuary's peace. Moyo charged forward, his mighty hooves pounding a rhythm of defiance. Luna emerged from the shadows, her eyes blazing with fierce protection. The villagers, armed with nothing but courage and conviction, stood side by side with their wild guardians. The battle was fierce and desperate. The jungle itself seemed to rise, roots tangling, vines snapping, as if nature fought alongside her protectors. Moyo's strength wavered under the strain of injury and exhaustion, but his heart beat strong with purpose. Amid the chaos, Taji led a group of children through the dense forest, planting saplings and creating barriers to slow the machine's advance. His youthful hands and hopeful spirit became symbols of the sanctuary's future. As the sun reached its zenith, the machines faltered, slowed by the unyielding resistance and the jungle's relentless will to survive. The invaders retreated, leaving behind a scarred but unbroken land. In the quiet that followed, Moyo stood atop a small hill, silhouetted against the fiery hues of sunset. His breath came heavy, his body battered, yet his eyes shone with a fierce light, the light of a guardian who had faced darkness and refused to yield. Elias knelt beside him, placing a hand on the buffalo's broad shoulder, a silent vow passing between man and beast. Luna appeared beside them, a shadow of grace and strength, her presence a reminder that the jungle's spirit lived on through them all. The sanctuary began to heal once more, nourished by the sacrifices and courage of its protectors. Taji's laughter echoed through the trees, a song of hope and renewal that promised a brighter tomorrow. And as night fell, the jungle whispered its ancient song, a song of resilience, love, and the unbreakable bonds that tie us all to the wild heart of the earth. The jungle at dawn was a symphony of awakening, a chorus of birdsong, the rustling of leaves, and the gentle murmur of the river winding its way through the ancient trees. Moyo stood quietly at the water's edge, his immense silhouette mirrored in the glassy surface, the scars on his weathered hide telling stories of battles fought and survived. Quito played nearby, his youthful energy a stark contrast to the old buffalo's measured calm. The wounds Moyo bore still throbbed with a memory of pain, yet they had become part of him, woven into the fabric of his being like badges of honor earned in a lifetime dedicated to protection and survival. The sanctuary thrived, a testament to the perseverance of those who believed in the possibility of harmony between man and nature. Elias and Amara had become steadfast leaders, their lives forever entwined with the jungle and its inhabitants. The villagers, once fearful and uncertain, had transformed into passionate stewards of the land, their hands nurturing seedlings that would one day grow into towering trees, their voices carrying songs of respect and reverence for the wild. But peace, as always, was a delicate balance, easily shattered by the ever-looming shadow of human ambition. News came one morning, carried by breathless runners and whispered in urgent tones. The poachers, defeated but not defeated, were returning, this time with allies armed with technology and greed that threatened to overwhelm even the sanctuary's defenders. The jungle held its breath. Moyo's gaze hardened, his muscles coiling with the familiar tension of impending battle. Luna slipped silently beside him, a phantom of the forest, her eyes glowing with fierce determination. Together, they were more than guardians, they were symbols of resistance and hope, a living legacy of courage that inspired all who knew their story. The villagers and conservationists rallied once more, forging alliances with distant communities and governments, weaving a network of support that stretched far beyond the jungle's edge. Taji, now a young man with fire in his eyes, became a voice for the voiceless, his passion igniting hearts and minds to stand against the destruction. The battle that followed was unlike any before. The poachers came with machines that roared like thunder and weapons that cut through the jungle's silence with deadly precision. Yet, the defenders fought with a unity born of love and desperation. Moyo charged into the fray, a living mountain of strength and will, his presence a rallying cry that echoed through the trees. Luna struck from the shadows, her claws and teeth a blur of lethal grace. The villagers used every tool at their disposal, traps to disable machines, strategic blockades, and an unyielding spirit that refused to break. Amid the chaos, Elias and Amara coordinated efforts, their leadership a beacon in the darkness. They moved through the battlefield like shadows, guiding and protecting, their bond a steady force that anchored the resistance. Quito, now fully grown and nearly as formidable as Moyo, fought with the ferocity of a protector, his youthful courage shining through every act of defiance. The jungle itself seemed to rise in defense, roots twisting to trip invaders, vines entangling machinery, and the very earth trembling with the heartbeat of life fighting for survival. The climax came on a day when the sun blazed fiercely overhead, casting harsh light on the battered sanctuary. Moyo, wounded yet unbroken, stood at the forefront, his breath ragged but his eyes ablaze with unyielding resolve. The poacher's machines faltered, caught in the jungle's relentless grip and the fierce resistance of its guardians. One by one, the invaders retreated, their defeat a testament to the power of unity and the indomitable spirit of the wild. In the aftermath, the sanctuary began the slow, painful work of healing. Moyo's wounds were tended with care and love, each scar a reminder of sacrifice and survival. Quito remained by his side, their bond deeper than ever, a living symbol of the future born from the struggles of the past. Elias, Amara, and Taji continued their work, their lives dedicated to ensuring that the jungle's heart would beat strong for generations to come. The villagers celebrated not just the victory, but the transformation of their own hearts, from fear to respect, from destruction to stewardship. And as night fell over the sanctuary, the jungle whispered its ancient song, a song of resilience, hope, and the enduring power of love that binds all creatures, great and small. Moyo stood beneath the stars, a solitary figure silhouetted against the vast sky, his journey one of hardship, courage, and profound connection. He was no longer just a buffalo, he was a guardian, a legend, a beacon of what is possible when love and sacrifice rise above fear and greed. His story, etched in the hearts of all who knew him, was a call to action, a reminder that the true strength of life lies not in domination, but in compassion and unity. And so, the legacy of Moyo and his companions lived on, a timeless testament to the wild heart of the earth and the unbreakable bonds that unite us all.